Hi there. You may turned off from my loud boopity boop music.
I tried to sell it this week.
You did a good job.
Thanks.
So hey everybody, it's me, Amanda of One Sweet Bite. It's Saturday, June 20th. This is my 9th show. Hope everyone's having a good day. And it stopped raining here in Austin, and I think it's probably gonna get real muggy and humid. So maybe you're inside watching my show today. We'll see. So today we are making a combo recipe. A lot of what I do for my side business is I make individual desserts, but what I like to do is take maybe a main recipe of something and then I think of other ideas that can go along with it to make it a little extra special. So for today what I'm doing is taking a Pioneer Woman recipe for brownie cookies, which the brownie cookies alone are just fine, but we're making them even better by doing a peanut butter filling and a ganache filling. I've made them before just doing the peanut butter filling, but I thought, why not do something even better? And ganache, as I've always said, ganache makes everything better, so why not? So this episode today will be, there's a lot of steps because we're making 3 different parts for one, what am I trying to say? One magnificent thing in the end. I don't know. Anyway, so we'll get started. There's a couple of things in the recipe that we need to have cooled, so we're going to do those first. So for the cookies, we have 4 ounces of baking chocolate, and when they say baking chocolate, this is, you can do a bittersweet chocolate or an unsweetened chocolate. And so I had on hand unsweetened. So what I've done is I took the 4-ounce bar and I've chopped it up into small pieces, and we're going to start to melt it in the microwave. And if you've never melted chocolate before, you always want to be very careful because chocolate can burn pretty quickly and it's terrible and your house will stink. You can't eat it, it tastes awful. So you just always want to be very cautious of any time you're melting chocolate. So what we're going to do is I just have it in a microwave safe bowl. I had already started it a little bit prior to us coming on live. I'm just throwing it in the microwave and I'm going to be doing it in 20-second increments. And the 20 seconds, you can possibly do 25. I like to keep it safe, again, because you just don't want it to burn. And so we're going to slowly melt it so that, we have better control of it. So you see, even after the 20, this is now 40 seconds total, you can see it's pretty melted on the bottom, and so I'm just gonna keep stirring. I have a nice little silicone spatula here, which works really well because I can scrape the bottom, and you see it really melts pretty quickly. There's still some good chunks in here. I would guess that this will all melt in one more round of 20 seconds. So let me throw this back in here. And just be careful, your bowl is going to be hot. So you can also melt chocolate in a double boiler on top of the stove, which would be a pot with a very low amount of water that you bring to a simmer. And you would have a heat-safe proof bowl on top, and you could let it melt that way. I find doing the microwave is faster, and we used to do it this way at the bakery all the time. And you can see, and we'll come over here because I can tell that it's, now bring this into the light, and you can see here, so that was a full minute, but not at one time. That is key. You don't want to throw that into your microwave and put it on a minute, because that chocolate sure could burn and then it would be bad. So that is all melted.
There's such a thing as bad chocolate?
There is such a thing as bad chocolate when it's burned. It's terrible. I've been in a kitchen when it has burned. The smell, you wouldn't think chocolate necessarily would smell bad, but it's terrible. It's a really like almost rancid, just awful smell. Anyway, so we have our chocolate melted, so we're gonna just let that sit because we want it to cool. And again, why we're having it cool is because we're gonna have eggs that we don't want to put into hot chocolate and make scrambled eggs. Our eggs are out at room temperature, however, you don't want to have two clashing temperatures going together. So the next thing we're going to move on to is our ganache, because with our ganache, once we do it, use it for the filling, we want it to have a thicker consistency. And so the only way we're going to get that is as the ganache sits for a while, it starts to thicken up. So we're going to make this now, and hopefully by the time we're ready to do the filling, it will be thick enough. We'll see. So we're going to take 8 ounces of heavy whipping cream, and we're going to go back to the stove, and we're going to be putting that in our little saucepan. And I apologize that on the recipe online, I had said 4 ounces of heavy whipping cream, or half a cup, and I had decided to do the filling a different way. So, sorry, oven is now at our correct temperature of 350. But going back to the ganache, I decided to do a full half side of ganache and a full half side of peanut butter filling. So I increased my heavy whipping cream to 8 ounces, and our chocolate is 8 ounces. But if you're following along today, and you just have the 4 ounces, that's fine. We can do it a different way for you, and I can show that as well. So here we have our 8 ounces of heavy whipping cream that I just have on a pretty low flame, not really low, but not really high. I like to stir it every once in a while so it doesn't get all the solids around the edge.
I think people really like watching the ganache in the previous episode.
I think they did too. Making ganache is pretty relaxing. It's kind of mesmerizing once we get to the point where we're going to be stirring the chocolate and cream together, and it comes together out of nowhere. I love it. I find that it really does add something to most any dessert that you're making. It's pretty simple. It's a beautiful shine that you add to something, and it's a simple thing to just add on top of a cake. Even if you have a cake that you're making and you don't necessarily feel like frosting the whole thing, you can make a batch of ganache and just pour it on top of your cake and let it fall along the sides, and it's going to be beautiful and it's going to taste wonderful. So we have this going. I'm just going to grab my chocolate to show you that. In my bowl, this is 8 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate that I've chopped into small pieces, and we're just going to let it sit. And this is a heat-proof bowl again, and you can see I do have it on something that's not going to slip once I add the milk to it, because then we're going to whisk it together, and we want it so that it's not going to move around too much. We're going to go back to our cream and just kind of keep an eye on it. Just takes a couple minutes for it to come up to the right temperature. And what again we're looking for when you make ganache is that you don't want it to come to a heavy boil. You have to be cautious when you bring any type of dairy product up to a simmer or a boil, because it can boil over very fast. I can already see that there's steam coming up from the cream. And what you're looking for is just a nice simmer where there will be some bubbles within the middle and along the edges. Now, one thing you want to note when you're making ganache is that you don't want to undercook your cream either, because then when you add it to your chocolate, it may become grainy because it's not the right temperature when you stir it. And then you won't get that really nice shine.
It's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You want it just right.
Exactly. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
So I can tell that the steam is getting stronger, billowing out more.
Could you use a thermometer?
You could. I unfortunately don't know what temperature you would be cooking it to.
You just know by...
I just know by sight. Because I've been making it so much for so many years, I feel confident in myself to watch it and keep an eye on it. And you see, I can tell that the cream is starting, it's getting to the point where it's leaving the skim along the sides. I guess that's what you'd say. And so I know it's getting close, and I can hear it, that it's starting to kind of bubble. And I know some people may just want an exact, so now you can see along the sides, we're starting to get our bubbles. And what I want, though, is just a few to start in the middle. So I know at this point it's going to be close, and it's really just keeping an eye, watching it, and I can tell we're almost there. This is exciting television, isn't it? Okay, so I can see that it started to come in here. I see that it's bubbling up in there. And that's it. And so I'm kind of just swirling my pan a little bit before I pour it in, only because you can develop a skin pretty quickly. So we've poured our cream over our milk, or excuse me, we've poured our cream over our milk. We've poured our cream over our chocolate, and so now we're going to let it sit for just about a minute. So while we're waiting for this minute to pass, I'll go over our ingredients real quick for our cookies. So our cookies today are 2 sticks of, now I'm using unsalted butter. You will notice that the recipe online said salted butter, and that's fine if you do that. Her recipe, she likes to add that little bit of salt to it. I prefer not to. I'm always the advocate of unsalted butter no matter what. So, and I've said that many, many times, but I didn't change it because this is her recipe and I didn't want to change it from what she calls for. But I'm using 2 sticks of unsalted butter that I cut up so that they could come to room temperature faster, because unfortunately I didn't take it out as early this morning as I would have liked. So the smaller pieces you cut it into, the softer it will get. If I just took 2 sticks of butter out and just laid them into the bowl, it'd be pretty hard to start mixing.
It's been 1 minute.
Okay. So thank you, Chris, for telling me it's been a minute. So now what we're going to do is come back, and I'll move this up. And so I just have a small whisk, and all I'm doing is going to the bottom of the bowl. My whisk is sitting at the bottom of the bowl, and I'm just stirring it in a small circle. And I'm just going to continue to do this. I don't start going around the bowl, whisking heavily. You can see I'm just doing this small motion of a circle at the bottom of the bowl. And you can see that the cream and the chocolate are starting to come together because it's starting to get darker. And you just let it do its thing.
This is everybody's favorite part.
Yes, I know. It's pretty miraculous, I think.
Mesmerizing.
Yes.
Hypnotic.
Yes. Because you kind of think, Is it going to come together?
You are getting sleepy.
It's not you're not doing anything. You're just stirring it a little bit, and all of a sudden, is it really going to come together?
And you can tell in your hand
Yeah.
as you're stirring.
Because I can feel that it's not as thick. Really, the chocolate is melted. And I can feel that it's all starting to come together, and you can kind of see that it is. And you'll see now it's starting. Where that dark chocolate will start to come through. And look at that. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's pretty cool.
And so at this point, I'm going to go around my bowl. And I can give it a good stir. And that's it.
And that's ganache.
That's ganache. And as I have always said, and if ever I have a bakery, I will make t-shirts and hats that say, Ganache makes everything better. And that's it. So, at that point, we're just going to let this sit, I don't know, over here. Because we want that to start to solidify and be of a thick, spreadable consistency. It takes a little while to get to that point, so we're just going to let that do its thing. Okay, back to the cookies. We got our 2 sticks of unsalted butter. In here we have 2 cups of granulated sugar. This is our 4 ounces of melted chocolate. This can be unsweetened chocolate or bittersweet. Some people like to do the bittersweet because you still have a little bit of sugar in there. Again, this is just what I had on hand. In here we have our 3 large eggs that are at room temperature.
What kind of eggs are they?
3 large eggs.
Pasture raised?
Pasture raised eggs. I always do the pasture raised. They're quite expensive, but it's worth it to me. But again, if you don't want to spend the money on pasture raised eggs, because it's a difference of about $4 a dozen, I don't blame you. As I tell people, I don't have children or anything, so I can spend a little extra money on the eggs. And here we have 1 tablespoon. Seems like a lot, but we have a large amount of ingredients that are going into this recipe. So this is 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. In here we have 2 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. And to that we are going to add, this is 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder. And so I'm just going to add that to our flour. And in here we have 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then in here we have 1 teaspoon of baking powder. And like always, I have my other whisk ready so that I can whisk the dry ingredients together. Especially when you're working with cocoa powder. It's always a good idea to whisk it together with your other dry ingredients because cocoa powder has a tendency to always have clumps. And you can kind of see them in here. So always trying to get those out now before you have it being added to your wet ingredients is best. I mean, if you end up having some clumps in your cookies, it's not the end of the world, but you know, you want to try to get them out as best as you can. You could even, before you added the cocoa powder and everything together, you could put it through a sieve. Now I'm using this for our peanut butter filling, so that's why I didn't use it here, but you can always do that. But I think we have our clumps out pretty good. And if not, my famous saying, that's okay. I haven't said that too much lately. Alright. Using that as my little go-to garbage area. Alright. So we'll go ahead and get started on the mixture. Because at this point I can feel that our chocolate has cooled significantly, so it's not hot. And I feel comfortable enough adding that to all of our ingredients. Alright, So what we're first going to do, and you're always going to end up mixing your butter and your sugars together first. That is a pretty standard for any recipe. We're using the paddle attachment on our KitchenAid today. If you don't have a KitchenAid, any kind, and you're just using by hand in a bowl, just your regular mixer attachments. We're gonna start it on low. And again, I always start everything on low because you don't want a big mess. And as always with any kind of dough, what you're looking for with your butter and your sugar is for it to be combined very well. Some people may look at this right now and say, well, it looks combined. No, we want to keep going because I can see, and if you really look in there, there's still chunks of butter. And we want the butter and the sugar to be thoroughly mixed together so that if you were to put it through your fingers, it would be just that granulated feeling, but creamy because of the butter. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. I'm going to pick up the ball a little bit more. And you're always just looking for a good fluffy consistency. And I'm always keeping my eye out for any chunks that are left over in that butter. Because once you start adding the rest of your ingredients, you're not going to be able to get those chunks out. That's why it's very important to make sure that your butter and your sugar are mixed very well. And I'm going to turn it down.
Can you overmix that?
Yes. You can always overmix anything.
That's what I do all the time.
Like for example, this isn't the same exact thing, but like with whipping cream, for example, if you're making whipped cream, you can make butter if you leave it go too long. This, eventually what could happen is that it would start to separate. And you don't want that. But you see how nice and smooth this is? It's like a just nice creamy consistency. That's what we're looking for. So we scrape down our bowl, get off as much as we can from our attachment. Okay, lock it, and now we're gonna put it on low. And so now we're gonna add in our chocolate. And just slowly add it to the side of the bowl while it's stirring. This can be tricky. And I'm kind of doing it backwards, so I'm hoping I'm not getting it all over anything. So you don't want to just like flop it all in there. Always adding something to a mix. It's good to keep it in a steady stream. And you see, did you have a question?
No. No, you're fine.
Oh, sorry. So I'm going to try to get some of that chocolate off the top there. And again, scraping down our paddle. And we're going to scrape the sides because we can see that. Always getting down in the bottom.
Should make mention that we no longer see comments live anymore on Facebook. So if anyone's commenting and asking questions, we apologize. We'll address them in the next segment.
Well, that's a bummer. Can you tell if anybody's watching?
Yeah, there's people watching.
Oh. Well, hi, people. Hi, friends. I hope you're not asking questions and I can't answer them. That's
Sorry.
Really frustrating. I don't know why that's not working. They haven't been working the last couple shows.
Correct.
Well, thanks a lot, Facebook. Anyway, so we see that I've scraped it down pretty good. I'm going to put it back on low. And we're going to start to add our eggs. Again, you always add your eggs one at a time. Let that go in there. Let it mix around pretty good. And then add our next one. We just want to make sure that it gets incorporated well before we add the next one. If two happen to fall in at one time, that's fine. I've had that happen. And just make sure it gets mixed in. And we put our last one. And then I'm just going to pour in our vanilla. And I'm going to do one more scrape down of my bowl before I start adding the dry. And if anybody knows why our comments aren't appearing on Facebook anymore, please let us know if we need to do something. Alright, and so at this point, we're putting it back to low and we're going to start adding our dry. Again, I'm always using a little scooper to put our dry ingredients in so that they go into a steady stream instead of a big glop of dry ingredients into wet. You can even see that some of the flour is still puffing out, but that's okay. Okay. And I always feel comfortable, even though I see there's some, you know, flour up there, I always feel comfortable that I'm going to mix it by hand 1 or 2 times, you know, at the end, so I can stop with the mixer. Just gonna clean up a little bit. That's why I love these bowls. Have I ever talked about these bowls? So I got this set. I think I got this set at Crate and Barrel. Product placement there, but they're wonderful. And I think you can get them at Target as well, but it's so nice. You have all these different sizes.
And they nest.
And they nest, so they don't take up as much room. And then you can get even replacement little bowls if you need a certain size, because I find I use a certain size over and over, so I was able to find more. It's always nice to have the right equipment when you're baking or cooking. Makes things much easier. You know, you may think, well, what do I need to spend the money on that? But if you're baking a lot, if you're cooking a lot, it really adds, it's time savers for you.
That also applies to anything with tools in the garage. Having the right tool is important.
Really, I mean, in life, having the right tool is what's important.
Time savers.
Keeping things organized. And so I'm just kind of getting, you know, everything off the edges there. Making sure everything is incorporated well. And you can see that this really does look like a brownie batter. So, at this point, what I'm going to do is grab one of my sheet pans.
What do I do?
You stand there and wait. And so we're going to scoop out our dough. And I'm using, again, my trusty old ice cream scoop, cookie scoop. This is, I believe, a 1 to 1.5 ounce size. You can use any size you want. But what's important when you're making a sandwich cookie is that they all need to be the same size. So I'm going to try my best to make sure they're all the same. I was trying to move that one, but he's set. He's not moving. And so I always feel comfortable doing 12 to a sheet pan because they are going to spread. So I try to do 3 down. And 4 across first. I don't try doing 4 over. I find if I can do the 4 and 3 down, I keep them all pretty even, usually. And you see I kind of wipe off the edge of my scoop, because if you don't, you get a lot of stragglers on the edges, which makes for a non-circular cookie. And again, since we're doing sandwich cookies, we want to try to keep everything pretty symmetrical. Boy, I'm sure bummed that there's no comments. I wonder why. Alright. And so again, our oven is preheated to 350. And we're going to be baking these for 11 to 12 minutes. I'm going to start checking at 10. It's all about your oven, and what we're looking for is for them to be kind of puffy, but they'll be circular. They're going to spread a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in the oven, but we're not going to wait because I'm going to move on to the peanut butter filling.
Is that what this is?
Yes. Okay. So I'm setting my timer at 10 minutes. And in the meantime, we're going to start on our peanut butter filling. And I should mention, the ganache and the peanut butter filling, I have no idea where I got these recipes from. The ganache I've been making since I worked in the bakeries back in 1996, which is crazy how long ago that was. And then I learned it in school, that it's an even ratio, usually of chocolate to cream. The peanut butter filling, I don't know, I got it off some recipe somewhere, but it's a pretty good filling. And it's nice. You could even use it as a frosting, so to speak, on like a cupcake if you wanted. You could use it as a filling for a cake. It's a pretty good standard peanut butter filling. And so you want to have a good sized bowl to stir this all in. Now I'm going to be stirring this by hand. And I will say, you may not want to do that because it depends on how strong you feel you are. And I only say that because you have to really break down your butter. So you want to make sure your butter is very room temperature soft. And so this is 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. And I didn't take it out soon enough this morning, so I threw it in the microwave for 10 seconds to soften it a little bit more. And you can do that. You don't want to soften it to where it's melted, because you do still want it to have the consistency of creamy, not melted. And here, this is 1 cup of creamy peanut butter. Now with peanut butter, I use Skippy Natural. I do not use Jif for any recipes. Jif has so much sugar in it that it would change the taste of what you're making. So I prefer not to use Jif. If you have Jif on hand, by all means go ahead. I prefer it to have its natural taste because I'm adding, this is 1 1/3 cup of powdered sugar. So you're adding a lot of sugar anyway. But again, if all you have in your house is Jif, then go ahead, and that's what you have to use. But if you were to make this for like a cake or something, you want to try to just get the one that doesn't have as much sugar added to it, because it really will enhance the flavor. Not enhance, but make it really, really sweet. And why I like this filling so much is that it still has a good peanut flavor and it's not overly sugary. So, as I've talked enough about the peanut butter, 1 cup of peanut butter, and this is our 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. And so now what I'm doing is going to mix these two together. And you can see I'm holding my spoon low because it gives me more control of it, because you really have to get this stirred together well. You don't want to see any chunks of butter. You want it to be nice and smooth. And I'm going to grab a spatula real quick, because I can see that there's some butter on my spoon, and so if I don't get that off now and mixed in, once we add our powdered sugar, I'm not going to be able to get that mixed in there. Alright, so I think I have that mixed in pretty well. Now we're going to start to add our powdered sugar. And powdered sugar in its own right is sifted sugar, or it's been basically ground up over and over and over again. And I've explained in a previous episode that we call it in the baking world 10x sugar, because it's been ground up 10 times. So it's ground up pretty good and it's pretty fine. However, there's still a lot of clumps in there. And I found if I don't sift the powdered sugar, I get too many lumps in here and it's really hard to get them out. So I'm going to do about half and sift this in there, because I want to make sure I get all these little chunks out of there. Then I'll do the rest.
Could you have sifted this prior?
You can, of course. I just find that since I have to add it all together, this is kind of simple. Okay.
Oh boy.
Oh boy, it got a little messy. Alright. Now, if you're doing this with a mixer, you want to watch, because as you just put in all that confectioner's sugar, it's going to go all over the place. And I'm just kind of mixing it so that it's all getting touched by the peanut butter, so to speak. You may be looking at this and thinking, how is this going to come together to be a nice smooth mixture? Well, that's where the elbow grease comes in.
You gonna need me for that or no?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And again, I'm holding my spoon low. And I'm just starting to really get this incorporated.
Could you have started stirring with just half the sugar?
Yes.
And then incorporated the other half after?
Yes. And ideally, you probably do want to do that. And you see it comes together. I'm going to scrape off this. Check checking my time. It says I have 2 minutes left on my cookies.
So we're going to see cookies come out, possibly.
We are going to see cookies come out. That was my intent.
Can I eat them? No?
No. So we see that we've now gotten it to, it's a thick consistency, but it's a spreadable consistency. I will say it's a little thicker than normal. I'm not sure why, but that's all right. And I'm going to kind of hold my bowl. All right. Got a little arm workout there. All right. So let me scrape this off here.
It's like 3D spoon there.
All right. I'm going to keep these spoons nearby. Move that over. So we're going to keep our fillings to the side. I feel like I'm sweaty after all that. Probably am. Those who know me well know that I get sweaty. So, I'm going to grab a cookie sheet, or excuse me, a cooling rack. Move these out of the way for a moment. And since we have just a minute or so, I'll start to scoop our next batch that's going to go in the oven. Get them started at least. Because we'll check them. Remember, we're checking our cookies at 10 minutes. To see, we're looking for a puffy, but we want them, what am I looking for? What word am I looking for? Not stable, but all right. Let's see. So again, this is at 10 minutes. And we can see there's, you know, no jiggling or anything. I'm going to tap my finger, and they feel pretty good. They feel pretty solid. So I'm gonna let those sit on my tray for about a minute before I move them to the cooling rack. In the meantime, I'm gonna finish putting the rest of the cookies on this one. And so I'm gonna bake off the remaining dough, let them all cool completely, and then we'll come back when we're going to put the fillings in between and sandwich them together. So I'll see you in a little while, a half hour or so, 45 minutes, something like that. All right, see you soon. Thanks. Bye.